the wind lifts dust from an abandoned path, and the sunset paints the sky in fiery orange. A mother and her daughter walk along the empty street, their silhouettes stretched into long shadows, faces weary, hands tightly clasped. For a moment, the town feels cold and unwelcoming, almost alien. In the distance, the silhouette of a man appears, broad-shouldered, with a tired yet determined gaze. What seems like chance will become the beginning of a new world, one with a home, family, and hope. The camera lingers on their eyes, the swirling dust, and the faint glow on the horizon, a harbinger of change. Dust swirled across the empty street, stirred by a breeze that carried the dry scent of sage and earth. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and rose, stretching long shadows across the worn wooden sidewalks. Each step Mary took with Clara in her hand echoed softly, a quiet rhythm against the emptiness around them. The houses loomed silently, their windows dark, doors firmly shut, as if the town itself were holding its breath. Every corner seemed to whisper indifference, every empty porch a reminder of how small and exposed they were in this vast, unyielding place. Clara's small hand tightened in hers, a fragile anchor, and Mary felt the weight of responsibility press down, a mixture of fear and determination she could not name. The street seemed endless, a ribbon of dust and shadows that wound between the buildings, and the wind carried the faint echoes of a distant life they had left behind. Their boots scuffed against the dry boards, the sound swallowed quickly by the silence, leaving only the occasional clatter of loose metal or the rustle of tattered curtains. Mary's eyes scanned every doorway, every darkened window, searching for a sign of welcome, a gesture of kindness, anything that could offer a momentary relief from the gnawing hunger and cold that had followed them like persistent shadows. Her mind moved in quick, careful calculations, weighing each step, each decision, aware that in a place like this, a single misjudgment could mean despair. The horizon glowed as the sun dipped further, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed to hold its breath with them. Then, far down the street, a figure appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, his posture steady despite the weight of exhaustion that hinted in the lines of his frame. The light of the setting sun caught him, turning him into a sharp silhouette against the soft glow of the evening, a figure as immovable as a cliff carved from the land itself. Mary's heart caught at the sight, an instinctive recognition that this was a presence unlike any they had encountered since leaving their home behind. His gaze swept the street with quiet attentiveness, and for the first time in days, Mary felt that the world might contain more than just closed doors and cold indifference. He moved with purpose, yet with patience, each step measured, unhurried, as though he knew the weight of what he carried, not just supplies or responsibilities, but the unspoken knowledge of lives that could be changed with the right choice at the right moment. Dust rose around his boots, mingling with the fading light, creating a halo of motion that drew the eyes of those who watched from the shadows. Mary felt Clara shiver slightly in her grasp, the child sensing the subtle shift in the air, a quiet promise of something different, something potent in its possibility. The town, which had felt so heavy and unyielding, seemed to pause, attentive to the arrival of this stranger, as if even the buildings leaned forward to witness what was unfolding. The man's eyes, steady and clear despite the traces of weariness, fixed on them. In that gaze, Mary recognized a decision being made, a silent acknowledgement that their presence mattered, that it was no longer only their struggle, but a crossing of paths that might alter their course entirely. The wind carried a subtle change, rustling the loose boards beneath their feet, tugging at the edges of skirts and sleeves, whispering in a language only the heart could understand. Time stretched in that instant, elongated by the tension and the unspoken potential that hung between them, fragile and electric, like the moment before lightning strikes across an empty prairie. Mary's chest tightened with a mixture of caution and anticipation, and Clara clung closer, sensing the shift without understanding it. The street, previously so empty and indifferent, became a stage where fate had begun its careful work. The silhouette moved closer, deliberate yet gentle, bridging the space between them with a steady certainty. Dust rose again, catching the light, and for a heartbeat, it seemed the world itself exhaled, a soft exhale that carried the promise of shelter, protection, and the faint, almost imperceptible glimmer of hope. Mary took a slow, deliberate step forward, her hand gripping Clara's tighter, aware that the first gesture had been made, that the path of their lives had shifted in a single, irrevocable moment. The sun sank further, the sky deepening to richer shades of orange and violet, and shadows stretched long across the empty street, blending with the rising dust in a dance that spoke of endings and beginnings. Mary felt the weight of the day pressing down, but beneath it, a pulse of possibility she hadn't felt in weeks, a whisper that perhaps the journey of survival was about to meet the first step of something larger. The figure ahead stopped, his silhouette resolute against the fading light, a presence that seemed carved from the land itself, steady and immovable, yet reaching out in the quietest of ways. In that stillness, the street, the dust, and the dying sun held their breath together with them, the turning of a page that promised change, a crossing from despair to a faint, persistent hope. The road to the ranch stretched ahead like a golden carpet, the late afternoon sun spilling warmth across the dusty path. Sparse bushes and tall grasses shimmered in the amber light, their edges softened by the haze of heat and dust. Mary held Clara's hand tightly, feeling the child's small fingers entwined with hers, both of them taking in the vast openness around them, a space that was intimidating yet strangely inviting. Every step along the trail seemed to carry a weight of anticipation, the rhythm of hooves and wagon wheels blending with the quiet hum of the prairie. In the distance, a house emerged, its brick walls glowing softly in the slanting sunlight. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, dissipating into the sky, carrying the faint scent of warmth and wood smoke. Mary's chest tightened at the sight, a strange mix of relief and apprehension settling over her. Clara's eyes widened as she took in the life that surrounded the homestead, chickens scratching in the dirt, cattle grazing quietly, the wide sweep of land stretching beyond the eye's reach. The ranch seemed alive, humming with an energy that spoke of care, labor, and the rhythm of a life that had purpose and steadiness. The man moved beside them with quiet assurance, his figure casting long shadows across the ground. He gestured to the fences that enclosed the pastures, the barns standing solid and practical, the fields that carried the promise of future crops. Every motion carried a sense of intentionality, of a life built on routine and persistence, a life that could now include them. Mary observed the details, her gaze tracing the lines of the house, the neatness of the yard, the subtle signs that a woman's touch had once tended this place. Her heart began to unclench, sensing that there was a space here for them, a place to rest and breathe, even as uncertainty lingered beneath the surface. The wagon rolled to a stop near the front door, the dust settling slowly around them in a thin, golden haze. Clara's small feet touched the ground hesitantly, eyes darting from the animals to the man who had guided them here, then back to the house that now seemed less foreign, more like a promise. Mary inhaled deeply, the scent of sun-warmed earth and wood smoke filling her lungs, mingling with the faint aroma of feed and hay. It was a scent that carried security, a rhythm that suggested a steady hand and a steady heart. They moved forward, taking in every detail. The yard held the quiet order of a place that had been lived in and cared for. The barn doors swung slightly in the wind, and the fences stood firm against the edge of the prairie. Mary's mind traced every possible scenario, considering the life that could grow here, the nights spent safe under a roof, the warmth of a hearth, the simple rhythm of daily work and care. Each small step forward seemed to fold back the weight of the long journey, replacing it with cautious hope. The man led them toward the house, his movements calm and deliberate. The porch was broad and sturdy, the wood worn smooth by countless footsteps, yet solid and welcoming. Mary felt a tug of something she had almost forgotten, a sense of possibility, a fragile feeling that perhaps, at last, they had found a place where fear and hunger did not rule the hours. Clara followed, eyes wide and attentive, her small voice silent in the shadow of what was slowly revealing itself as safety. Inside, the house held the quiet simplicity of a life measured in work and care. Rooms were practical and clean, a few traces of previous life tucked neatly into corners, the air smelling faintly of wood and warmth. Mary let her gaze wander across the spaces, imagining the routines of cooking, cleaning, tending the children, and walking the wide grounds that stretched beyond the house. The man moved beside them, guiding their eyes, indicating fields, pastures, barns, and the edge of the woods. Each gesture was subtle, but in its simplicity carried the weight of promise, a future built not on chance, but on deliberate, steady hands. Mary felt the day stretch long in her chest, a ribbon of moments woven with both exhaustion and wonder. The horizon glowed in fading gold and rose, and with each step through the yard and into the house, she sensed a border being crossed, the past, heavy with hunger, fear, and uncertainty, receding behind them, while ahead lay warmth, shelter, and the chance to begin anew. The ranch, with its solid walls, roaming animals, and open land, became a symbol of possibility. Each detail whispered of a life that could be theirs, a rhythm that could bring security, and, perhaps most importantly, a quiet hope that they could belong somewhere again. Mary lifted her eyes once more to take in the scene in its entirety, feeling the weight of the moment settle, steady and grounding. Clara's small fingers squeezed hers, and she sensed the child's silent acknowledgement of the promise that lay ahead. The road behind them, the dust they had tracked, and the uncertainty they had carried seemed to melt into the warmth of this new place. In that slow, unfolding light, every detail, the house, the fields, the animals, and the steady presence of the man beside them, spoke to the quiet power of care, security, and the fragile, growing certainty that this day marked the beginning of something enduring. The house settled into its own rhythm, each floorboard creaking softly underfoot, each corner holding the quiet evidence of life in motion. The scent of cooking mingled with the faint aroma of hay, a constant reminder of the world just beyond the walls. Mary moved through the rooms with tentative confidence, learning the contours of the space, placing furniture in ways that made the rooms feel lived in, gently layering warmth over the austerity that had defined the house before. Each day brought small victories, the kind that whispered reassurance to a weary heart. Clara explored the yard with endless curiosity, chasing after chickens and marveling at the small kittens that darted between the shadows. She discovered hidden corners, tiny paths through the grass, and the quiet comfort of knowing where she belonged. The older girl learned the rhythm of chores, helping with mending, cleaning, and preparing simple meals, feeling the first stirring of purpose in her small, careful movements. The domestic work, once foreign and intimidating, became a language through which she could shape her world and make it home. Ethan moved through the property with steady assurance, his presence a constant anchor. His hands were skilled and strong, his knowledge of the land and animals evident in every motion. He tended the barn, repaired fences, and guided Mary and the girls in small ways, never forcing, always steady. Watching him, Mary absorbed the subtle lessons of care and responsibility, learning not just the mechanics of running a home and ranch, but the patience and attention it required to shape a life that others could depend on. Mornings became a time of quiet routine. Mary rose before the sun, stirring fires, filling water pails, and feeding the animals. The smell of frying bacon and warm bread filled the kitchen, signaling the start of a day where purpose met necessity. Each task, repeated, became a thread in the fabric of a life slowly knitting itself together. The animals moved in predictable patterns, the chickens scratching the ground, the cattle lowing softly, and even the wind through the trees seemed to carry reassurance rather than threat. Evenings were different, softer. The sun sank low, casting a golden glow across the yard and painting long, quiet shadows across the floors. Mary and Ethan lingered in the open spaces, observing the girls as they played among the animals, or simply stood by the porch watching the horizon. There was a stillness that carried more than calm. It carried the sense of a life that could endure, the feeling of stability after months of wandering and uncertainty. The house itself seemed to breathe with them, each room filled with the subtle signs of living. Furniture moved, surfaces dusted, linens folded, meals prepared, and quiet laughter echoing against the walls. Days passed, each one layering a warmth over the walls and spaces that had once felt cold and unyielding. Mary's hands grew more confident in their movements, her gaze more certain. The girls found their own patterns, small routines that gave shape to their days, laughter filling corners where silence had once lingered. And through it all, Ethan remained present, a quiet, steady force, guiding without command, supporting without intrusion. The house, the yard, the wide prairie beyond, and the rhythm of their combined efforts began to form a single unspoken promise that here, at last, they could belong, and that belonging could grow into something enduring, rooted, and warm. The distant sound of heavy, hurried footsteps carried across the plains, echoing against the wide, empty spaces and reaching the ranch like a warning from the past. Mary froze instinctively, her heart tightening as Clara pressed herself close, seeking the protection only a mother could offer. Ethan remained beside them, his broad figure unmoving, calm yet alert, a steadfast presence that seemed to push the tension back into the fading light. The air itself felt thick, carrying the weight of old debts, unsettled business, and dangers that had followed them across counties, reminders that the past could never be fully escaped. Every movement that day became deliberate, measured. The opening of the gate was cautious, each swing watched for signs of trouble. Ethan moved through the barn and pens with a watchful eye, checking the livestock, making sure nothing had been disturbed. Mary followed quietly, learning to read his subtle signals, the way he paused at a sound, the way his hands tightened on the reins, the way he positioned himself between the girls and the world beyond. Even the wind seemed to carry a whisper of unease, rustling through the high grass and casting flickering shadows that mirrored their anxiety. As the day unfolded, small tasks were approached with heightened awareness. Mary swept the porch slowly, eyes scanning the horizon, ears attuned to every distant noise. Clara explored the yard, but her movements were hesitant, glances constantly darting toward her mother and the looming figure of Ethan. The chickens scattered nervously, and even the barn cats paused in mid-step, sensing the tension in the air. Nothing escaped Ethan's attention. Every brush of wind, every sound of hoof or paw was catalogued, measured, and met with quiet, effective action. The family discovered in these moments the fragile strength that grew from unity. Mary's hands found reassurance in purposeful work, her body attuned to the rhythm of protection, care, and vigilance. Clara learned to trust her mother's calm and the way Ethan's presence could make even the sharpest threat feel containable. Each passing hour reinforced their reliance on one another, shaping bonds that were no longer abstract but tangible, like the sturdy fence posts and wide beams of the ranch house itself. By the afternoon, the initial fear began to settle into a tense determination. Mary's eyes, once filled with uncertainty, now carried a quiet steel, a reflection of the fortitude she had drawn from their shared challenges. The girls moved with more confidence, guided by the invisible thread of security woven by Ethan's constant watchfulness. Even as the shadows grew long, the threat of the past loomed, yet it no longer had the power to paralyze. The day closed with a sense of hard-won understanding. The ranch, the house, and the surrounding land felt alive with their shared resilience. Mary recognized that their strength was not in isolation, but in the bonds that held them together, in the mutual trust that allowed fear to be acknowledged without consuming them. Ethan remained the quiet anchor, steady and unwavering, teaching without words that courage was not the absence of fear, but the will to move forward despite it. In that tense, lingering twilight, the family understood that their unity was a shield, and that every challenge faced together only made the walls of their home stronger, the hearth warmer, and their hearts more certain. The quiet of the ranch shattered abruptly as the sound of hooves thundered across the fields, mixing with the panicked cries of livestock. Horses neighed sharply, the cattle scattered in every direction, their hooves striking the ground with chaotic rhythm. Dust rose in thick clouds, swirling around the fence posts and along the wooden planks of the barnyard. Mary's heart leapt as she saw the shapes of strangers moving across the pastures, their intentions unmistakable in the haste and force of their approach. Instinct took over, and she gripped the rifle tightly, her knuckles whitening as the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. Ethan was immediately at her side, his movements precise and deliberate, positioning himself between the intruders and the girls. The years of labor and survival shaped his every action. There was no hesitation in the way he assessed the attackers, calculated their approach, and responded with controlled force. Mary felt the steadiness of his presence like a tangible shield, a certainty that steadied her own fear and sharpened her resolve. Clara and the younger girl crouched behind the porch, eyes wide, peering from the shelter of shadows, absorbing the tension, the noise, and the wild motion that enveloped their home. The confrontation erupted in a flurry of movement. Shots rang out, sharp and echoing, blending with the panic of the animals. Dust clouds mingled with the smell of gunpowder and the earthy scent of trampled hay. The horses' flanks brushed against fence rails as they bolted, and the cattle surged forward in a wave of frantic energy. Every action was decisive, a blocked path, a raised rifle, a careful maneuver to control the herd. Mary discovered an unexpected calm, a focus honed by months of vigilance, and the knowledge that failure was not an option. Within minutes, the chaos subsided. The attackers, confronted by the combined resolve of the family and the sudden precision of their defense, retreated into the horizon, leaving dust and lingering echoes of panic in their wake. The animals gradually settled, their breathing heavy but relieved. Silence returned, not the emptiness of before, but a quiet waited with triumph and recognition. Mary lowered the rifle, her hands still trembling, but her gaze clear and steady, filled with the knowledge that she had met danger and survived alongside those she loved. Ethan checked the perimeter, ensuring no lingering threat remained. Each girl emerged cautiously from hiding, faces flushed, eyes reflecting awe and a newfound understanding of the seriousness and stakes of life on the ranch. The family gathered in the center of the yard, not speaking, but feeling the unspoken connection strengthened by what they had endured. The experience had been brief but intense, a crucible in which fear and courage had been tempered together. By the end of the day, a sense of unity had crystallized. The trial had shown them the depths of their resilience, the power of their combined strength, and the quiet but undeniable truth that they were more than individuals surviving together. They were a unit, a bond that no outside force could easily break. Mary's heart, once weighed with doubt and caution, now carried a steady certainty. The ranch felt alive in a new way, a world where every heartbeat, every gesture, every shared glance contributed to a circle of protection and trust. That day became a symbol of their alliance, a testament to courage, and the unspoken promise that they would face whatever came together as one. Months passed quietly, the days stretching long under the wide sky. The ranch hummed with life, each corner alive with movement and small routines that had grown into a rhythm the family shared. The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the fields in shades of gold and amber. The girls ran through the open pastures, chasing kittens that tumbled across the grass, their laughter rising like music above the soft rustle of the wind. Mary watched from the porch, her hands resting lightly on the railing, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle swell of contentment in her chest. Each giggle, each purr, each darting shadow across the field reminded her that the days of fear and uncertainty were behind them. Ethan moved through the yard, tending to the livestock, his hands sure and steady. Every gesture carried care, a gentle touch to a horse's flank, a careful adjustment of the barn door, a watchful eye on the animals as they grazed. Even in work there was tenderness, a silent communication that filled the space between him and Mary with trust and understanding. The shared responsibilities of the ranch, once daunting and new, had become a language of partnership, a way of showing love without words. Each chore completed side by side strengthened the bonds that had grown slowly, steadily, in the quiet of daily life. Inside the house, the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the earthy aroma of herbs hung to dry, creating a comfort that wrapped around every corner. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting dancing shadows across the walls, illuminating the careful arrangements Mary had made to bring warmth and personality to each room. It was a home, not just a house, a living space that spoke of care, continuity, and the presence of those who nurtured it. Even the simplest acts, the folding of laundry, the setting of the table, the sweeping of floors, carried a sense of love and attention that transformed the physical structure into a refuge, a place of safety and belonging. The girls, free to explore, learned the rhythms of the land. They fed the chickens, chased the kittens, and learned to ride under careful guidance. Their confidence grew with each task, their laughter mingling with the wind and the soft lowing of the cattle. Mary felt pride swell quietly in her chest, not loud or showy, but steady and enduring. She observed the ways in which her children adapted, embraced, and thrived in this new environment, feeling the subtle satisfaction that came from seeing growth and happiness born from patience, care, and protection. Evenings were a time for quiet reflection. Mary and Ethan moved through the house together, their steps careful and familiar. Small gestures,
The passing of a cup of tea, the steadying of a hand on the kitchen counter, a glance shared across the table, spoke more than words ever could. In these moments, the life they had built revealed itself fully, secure, grounded, and alive. The hardships of the past seemed distant now, softened by the rhythm of work, play, and the unspoken bonds that held them together. As night settled over the ranch, the stars emerged in the vast sky above, tiny points of light mirrored in the calm of the family below. The fire burned low in the hearth, casting a golden glow that filled the rooms with warmth and the promise of safety. The girls drifted to sleep under quilts warmed by hands that loved them, and Mary lingered at the window, looking out at the land she had once feared would swallow them whole. Instead, it had become a place of life, resilience, and quiet joy, a world shaped by courage, hope, and the steadfast presence of those who had chosen to protect one another. The love that had grown between Mary and Ethan was subtle, expressed in acts rather than words. Each shared task, each moment of care, each protection offered in the face of danger, built a foundation stronger than anything promised or declared. They had discovered the kind of intimacy that thrives in patience, in shared burdens, and in the unspoken understanding of hearts aligned in purpose. Together, they had created a life that balanced strength and tenderness, independence and interdependence, fear and courage. The ranch, alive with movement, sound, and light, reflected the transformation of the family. What had begun in uncertainty and desperation had blossomed into security and warmth. Home was no longer just a place to sleep or eat, but a sanctuary, a canvas for growth, love, and the daily miracles of ordinary life made extraordinary by care and presence. Every corner of the property, every animal, every carefully tended plant testified to the life they had nurtured together. As the fire dwindled and the night deepened, the family settled into the comfort of shared space and silent acknowledgment of their journey. Mary felt the steady pulse of contentment, the quiet triumph of having found a place where fear no longer dictated the rhythm of life. Ethan's hands brushed briefly against hers, a confirmation of trust and commitment, and she allowed herself to lean into the certainty of their bond. The ranch breathed around them, alive with the subtle sounds of nocturnal life, and Mary recognized that they had not only survived, they had flourished. Follow Dust and Devotion Tales to experience more stories of courage, love, and life on the frontier, where the heart's strength creates homes, families, and hope for the future.